Hi there, it is me, BrettFish, and I would like to welcome you to the very latest episode of Out of the Fishbowl Season 2. And I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for investing some of your precious time into spending these moments with me. I see this as an absolute gift and I do not take it lightly at all, so thank you. This episode is going to have a very different flavor and feel from all the ones that have gone before, and especially the first two episodes of season 2, because where did we start? We started with me asking you, what is the worst thing that you've ever done? And kind of confessing, sharing one of the worst things I've ever done. And I mean, can you start more hectically than that? I think, let's get right in there, right? And then we moved on in episode 2 to look at disingenuous questions. What are questions that we ask people where we don't really care about the answers? And I called that lying questions. And so we've started this season on quite a heavy or quite a penetrative note. And I want to say that this episode is hopefully going to be a whole lot of fun. And I cannot wait to share it with you. This is going to be like a totally different direction and it's going to be great. Oscar Wilde once wrote, "To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist. That is all." And then Becca Lee expanded on that thought when she wrote this: "The purpose of this glorious life is not simply to endure it, but to soar, stumble and flourish as you learn to fall in love with existence. We were born to live, my dear, not to merely exist." And you know, even Jesus, who I've mentioned is somebody that I try to follow in word, thought, and action, even Jesus Christ said this: "I have come so that you may have life and have it to the full." And I think, or I imagine when many of us think about Christianity or church, that might not be the picture that comes to mind. But I want to say this, that there are so many people I know who are actively trying to follow Jesus, and that statement is the epitome of their lives. Those are the people who are deeply embedded in justice. Those are people who are building honest relationships with the marginalized. Those are people who are pushing the boundaries and just really getting their feet dirty. I have come so that you may have life and have it to the full. And so I want to invite you to breathe in deeply and join me as we explore a life that takes place across the boundaries and limitations of mere existence in an episode that I like to call
Episode 3, an Exist-ential Crisis.
Now, as you may have gathered, if you followed me for some time on social media or listened to a few of these Out of the Fishbowl podcasts, or perhaps if you've met me in real life, I am someone who believes in taking life seriously, in actively working towards justice, in fighting against injustice, in trying to learn by reading and listening and engaging with people who think differently from me. I don't particularly enjoy superficial conversations, if those are the only conversations we ever have. Even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking I'm a huge fan of Monty Python, and you can't get kind of more random or superficial than conversations about spam or argument sketches or dead parrots or things like that. So I really can enjoy superficial and random and misdirection. But if that's the only place we go, if it never gets beyond superficial, then that doesn't interest me or excite me so much. And I can be quite serious about a whole lot of things. But one of the things that I'm most serious about is having fun. Now, fun is a weird thing, right? Because it's so completely subjective. One person's fun might be another person's please don't let Adam Sandler ever make another movie again. So what I find fun or funny may not resonate with you at all. And that's okay. Because as I talk about some of the things that I find to be fun, remember that at the heart of this conversation is the question, how can I move beyond merely existing and start living or thriving? And so I want to say to you, add in your own stories to this mix. My stories of what I found to be fun might not resonate with you, but add in your own stories. Think of different examples of things that can be stepping out of the box, stepping out of your comfort zone, trying something new or fun or quirky or whatever. And so lean heavily into this idea of how can I regularly add things to my life routine so that I will find time or make time to come alive. That's what we're looking for. How do I come alive and how do I help others around me to come alive? And for me, one of the things that has done this for me is hair. when I was in my 20s and even 30s, I loved doing fun things with my hair, particularly changing the color of my hair. And so the new James Bond movie titled No Time to Die was not a statement of truth for me, because I absolutely found every time to dye my hair. And I loved doing different colors. And every few months I would be like, cool, what's next? Peroxide blonde happened a few times, as did super dark brown. So my natural hair color used to be blonde when I was growing up. And then when I was in standard 9 or grade 11, I dyed it really dark brown. And ever since then, it's kind of come back as a kind of brownish blonde. So it did something long term to my hair. And black is another color that I've done a lot of times. And when I got married, my hair was dyed my favorite color, which as you may know is purple, although it was a more kind of black purple version, but very noticeable. And a lot of people when they saw it were like, oh, didn't your wife mind? But if I'm remembering the story correctly, and I think I am, I think the purple hair was actually Val's idea. So she sent me to her hairdresser and she added the purple to my hair. And it was great because just every few months or years, I loved to change up the look by trying something different with my hair. I grew it super long at one stage so that it was halfway down my back. And if I leaned forward and put my hair over my head, it would actually completely cover my face. I've got a picture of that. And even one time, I remember shaving it off completely along with two of my mates at the time, Nick and Tim Small. Some of you may know them. And I did not look good as a baldy, and so I'm quite nervous about what seems a little inevitable at the time, as my hair's starting to thin and looks like it's going that way. But the reason I didn't look good as a baldy, my head for some reason went completely red when it was cut and took a while to not be red. And then I tend to sunburn quite dramatically, and so that didn't help at all. So it was a season of hoodies and caps and beanies and hats and keeping it covered until it started to grow. So the bald look, not my favorite look. I misguidedly tried braids once at the end of a 10-week trip to Malawi just before we left. And I remember one of the most painful experiences of my life, or my hair life at least, where I sat for over 4.5 hours as 2 or 3 at times African women pulled my hair, which in hindsight was probably too short, out of my scalp to attach the extensions. And so that was a grueling process. It was super painful. It did look pretty great, actually, I thought. But because my hair was too short, it lasted about a week and then they started coming out. So not my best life decision. And I also did once what I refer to as the leopard, where I decided to add black dye to my hair, but only to about half of my head. And so there were kind of patches, and I think my hair before was kind of blondish, and so patches of black and then patches where it was the dye had kind of got in and kind of not gone in, and so half black and half kind of dirty blonde. And that did not really go so well. I mean, I've got a photo of it that I think is okay, but I remember thinking that that was not a great hair time for me. And I think one of the great aspects of doing cool things with your hair is you can do things that go badly because it grows out, or you can shave it and start again. So trying something a bit risky, trying something a bit new, trying something you haven't done before, it's not the worst thing if it doesn't work out. And then before we went to America about 10 years ago, two of my good friends, Dreadlock Mike and formerly Dreadlocked Emo Kev, took about 2 days to help me dread my hair, which again was a little bit on the short side. And so over the next 3 years, my hair grew and it was in dreads. And towards the end of that, started looking fairly good. And I absolutely loved having dreads. And I absolutely hated having to care for my dreads and try to keep them clean and smelling decent. And Val definitely agreed with that part of it. And so the deal was that when I returned to South Africa, I could keep them for a year just to kind of show them off to people that I knew. And then they had to go. And I found that I was a celebrity at most traffic lights. Black dudes would walk up to me in the car and just fist pump me for no reason, or just like, "Irie man." And I remember walking down Long Street in Cape Town, instead of being offered drugs, people would come and ask me for drugs. So yeah, it was a love-hate relationship with those, but I did love having dreads. I loved the feel and the look of them. And then more recently, I went through my purple and green phase. And then after that, just the pure neon green, kind of Joker mocha style, and I really enjoyed that green, and I might try that again when I have some cash. I do also tend to like, this is the confusing, but I really like the look and feel of my hair when I go really, really short, but I tend to prefer having long hair. So when it's really, really short, there's that nice feel of just running your hands through your hair, and it feels really great when you do like a number 4 or a number 2. And I've also loved just trying out new colors and styles and just having fun. And on social media, and the Twitterer in particular, so many people who, let's be honest, likely live in their mom's basement rent-free, bring my hair in my profile pic, or they used to when I was using the neon green picture, and they bring it into the conversation when they run out of argument. And so this could be generally on a race conversation, or maybe something about politics or justice, and then somebody will be like, oh, he's got green hair. Haha, you can't have an opinion, green hair. And so I've been called Antifa because of my green hair. And I've been told people can't take me seriously. And like a whole bunch of other crap that is usually the moment or the clear sign to me that I've won the argument. And so somebody will be like, green hair. And another victory for me. So that's just been part of the journey. So what about you? Is hair one of the things that helps you thrive and come alive more than exist? And if we think about hair, when we're talking about superficial, like hair is not a big... hair is a justice deal in some conversations, so we can't write it out completely. But typically, like hair, what it looks like, who cares? It's such a non-thing. But I know for a lot of people, hair is important. I think especially for women, often, hair is important. But there are a lot of guys as well, that their hair matters. And so is hair and playing around with it and looking good and trying new things, is that something that brings you alive? And again, it's okay if it isn't. Remember that matching my Thrive indicators is not the point here at all. But being aware of what gives you life and makes you come alive, that's what we're looking for. And this next one might likely surprise you, but another thing that makes me come alive is airports. Wait, what? That's right, who doesn't love a good airport? And this example is probably the epitome of what I'm talking about when I say find moments to move from existing to living. Interrupt the normal flow of whatever normal looks like for you. And what I'm not saying is that for you, this should be airports, as I'm about to describe them. Because I think for a lot of you, what I'm about to describe and share might be absolutely terrifying because it's not you. And that's not the point here. It's not do my thing, but discover what your thing is. So airport appreciation started for me, I think, when I flew to Durban to visit two of my greatest friends in the world, then and now, Sam and Debbie. And we're talking late 90s, I think. And I arrived at the airport to be welcomed by 4 full-body suited Teletubbies. Yes, you heard that right. Dipsy, Lala, Po, and of course, Tinky Winky were standing with posters, I think, waiting to greet me. So I stepped out of the plane, not expecting anything, walked into the welcome lounge and saw 4 Teletubbies. And this was quite soon after the Teletubbies had kind of bounced onto the scene. And a tradition was born. Because the next time Sam flew to Cape Town, she was greeted by a man and a yellow stuffed dolphin called Nobob, wearing a sheet with a tambourine and a flower in his hair, and Nobob was wrapped in white with a flower around his ear, Hare Krishna style, which, as I think about it, as I'm making this episode, I feel like there might be a level of inappropriateness in that now, but at the time it was fully intended as some harmless fun. And so this tradition started of not every time, but a lot of the times, and particularly when it involved certain people, dressing up and creating fun posters to welcome people at the airport. And so I was a gorilla and I was a mummy, totally wrapped up in toilet paper and bandages. And it caught on with other friends as well. So when we flew back to America the one time, we were greeted by our former housemate Erin in a full giant papier-mâché Betty Boop head. And if you don't know what Betty Boop is, it's an American thing, just Google it. But this was the stuff of legends. I think it was something that he made for Halloween. But he stood in the airport for something like 2 to 3 hours, sweating his life off, having photos with randoms. And he did it, and it became, arriving at the airport became this amazing event. It became special, it became a story, it became significant. And what I love about the airport tradition, in addition to all of the personal and friend love, is that it becomes a huge gift for random other people waiting to welcome their people, and for airport staff and security. Think about it. Like, waiting at the airport is often a very lonely thing. It's a very boring thing. You're waiting for people so that you can carry their luggage, get them to the car, get them home, and that's kind of where the real welcome starts. Welcoming people in an airport lounge feels really weird. You do this weird hug thing and you walk off, and it's a really weird, strange space. And so when something happens in that space, to interrupt it, when there's somebody dressed as a mummy, when there's somebody with a sign with like a really clever pun on it, or really awful pun on it, when there's somebody like fully dressed up in something you don't expect, then suddenly it becomes an event that you are part of as a spectator. It becomes something you can take photos of. It becomes a story for when you get home. I remember the time I drove to the airport dressed as a mummy, pulled up at the traffic lights, and I felt the entire vehicle next to me. I felt them do a double take as they all looked like, what is going on here? And I love those moments. Kids pointing, smiles, laughter, people asking for photos. That is a story for them. It's a memory for them. It's something that makes a moment of their life just that little bit more special. Something for them to take and share around the dinner table. It is just such a big win on every level. So much so that Val got us a dress-up suitcase, which we started filling with wigs and bunny ears and funny hats and neon material skirts and more, which could also be used for videos and occasions with our growing number of nieces and nephews. The airport tradition probably reached its height when I think we went to meet the Betty Boop housemate Aaron and his wife Sarah when they came to visit us. This one we went all out for. Val in pink wig, funky glasses, pink top and neon multicolored skirt. And me and my friend Megan Choritz's bee suit with yellow hard hat and black and yellow striped overalls. I do not know why Megan has a bee suit, but this is full on. And I was holding a sign with first name Hugh and last name Jas, or Hugh Jas when you speak it out. And Val's sign read Tess as the first name, with a made up surname Tickle, Tikal, as the last name, or Tess Tickle when spoken. Now, one thing you need to understand about this scenario is that I am typically the loud, extroverted, 20 years improv guy who generally doesn't care too much what people, especially strangers, think of me. Whereas Val tends to be a lot more professional and introverted, not someone who likes to draw attention to herself. And I don't know what happened this time. I'm not sure if it was the costume or the sign or the occasion or what, but Val absolutely went for it. So the crowds were already enjoying or being horrified by the look of us and the words on the signs. But then as people started arriving and making their way out of the arrivals lounge into our public space, you could hear a woman's voice shouting, "Testicle! Are you testicle? I'm looking for a testicle, people." And huge ass. I need a huge ass. Has anyone seen huge ass? I mean, this was almost straight out of a Bart Simpson prank telephone call episode, and it was glorious. I have never seen Val go all out in that way to such an extreme, and I could not have been prouder. In fact, this is one of the best days and experiences of my whole life. It's one of the things I will never forget. It was absolutely amazing. And so hopefully now you understand why airports are such good spaces for me, because they've provided moments to move way beyond existing and even venture past living to burst into the space of thrive. Oscar Wilde, to live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, that is all. So what is living for you, or thriving? And does it happen often enough? For many people, it might be as simple as interrupting the evening screen time with a walk through the neighborhood or a book and a glass of wine. It might mean choosing to bake that special dessert this weekend, or trying out a new recipe that you've always wanted to make. It could be putting your favorite music album on and lying in the middle of the room with your eyes closed. It could be pumping up the music and having a dance party when no one's home. It doesn't have to be big. It just needs to be intentional. It could be reconnecting with an old friend for a coffee date. It could be sitting with your parents or grandparents and asking them to tell you some stories of when they were young that you've never heard. I've been blown away by my dad in particular on many occasions where he whips out another story and you're sitting there going like, wow, you did that? And then I'm going, oh, maybe I am related to you. Like, some of the stuff my dad has gotten up to is insane and hilarious, but you'd never know about it until a moment is created where there's a story. And so sitting with older people and saying, tell me, what's the weirdest thing you ever did? What is the most trouble you ever got into? Finding ways of making those moments come alive. There's so many different things. The things don't really matter, but also they don't need to cost money. One of the things that I love, which was Val's idea, and we've done it a couple of times, we're definitely going to do it more, is taking some camping chairs to Newlands Forest. And there's kind of this little river, little stream thing that goes through between these two kind of cliff faces or whatever. So you go into this little valley and we put our camping chairs there. We take our snacks and our cooler boxes and we invite a few of our friends and everybody brings a book. And so social distancing before social distancing was popular or unpopular. And you sit in the river or on the side of the river and you're snacking on your chips and having a drink and sit for an hour or two and read a novel just out in nature. And that's something you can do with people, but by yourself at the same time. And that has been an amazing time. It's so simple to organize a picnic with a bunch of people at the local park. So many different ideas. The idea doesn't matter. Maybe starting a WhatsApp group with a bunch of friends, and each week somebody chooses an idea for a Saturday morning and you go do that. And this is also something that you can give as a gift to other people. And this is important. When we were living in the States in quite a tough context, we had some friends, and these were not even super close friends, more kind of acquaintance friends or family friends growing up, who sent us money every month to pay for a date night. What a gift. Shout out to Lisa and Jacques. Thank you. What a gift. Because that was money that we had to put towards date night because it was given to us for date night. So if you gave me $50, I'd put it in my wallet and it would just kind of be absorbed into the money. But if you give me this money and say, this is for date night, then we had to be intentional. We had to be thinking about dates. We had to be thinking about where we'd go and what we'd do. And it gave us a breather. It was refreshing. It was life-giving. This could be offering a night of babysitting to friends with young children, especially maybe friends that are finding it really tough with young children, or maybe even a weekend away. It could be extending your Christmas meal to someone who otherwise might have been alone. Both my family and Val's family have been amazing at that in terms of being a good example. And even though it was something that growing up I often resented, I think, it's now a tradition that I embrace and I love. Like, I want to be sharing Christmas meal with somebody who would otherwise be alone. And the specifics are not important. And as I've said a few times here, what works for you may be so very far away from what works for me. But let me end off with a few more fun stories of how these moments of thrive have played out for me, because they might trigger your own stories for you. And some of these, let me disclaim that I would not recommend to anyone because, well, you'll see. And the first one is one of those. So it is titled Toilet Papering a Deacon's House. And there was an evening where a few of us from a church function were hanging around, and it ended up with just being Travis and Candy and myself, who were not particularly close friends. We were kind of friends, but not really great friends. The fact that the three of us ended doing this thing together is quite strange, I think, in some ways. And we thought it would be a fun idea to go and toilet paper the house of one of the deacons of the church. And so we drove out to where they live out near Muizenberg, and it was midnight. We were dressed all in black. We had the black camouflage stripes on our face, which I think is okay. Don't think that's black face, like camouflage face stripes. And we went out at 12 or maybe 2 in the morning. It was like late, and we started wrapping toilet paper around the car and around the tree and on the garden. And what happened was, in this particular story, and this is where the story becomes don't try this at home, don't try this in South Africa or maybe most places in the world, is that at some point in the night the mom needed to go to the bathroom, and so she was going to the bathroom and noticed, or the kitchen for some water or something like that, noticed out the window that there was movement in the garden. There were strange people on the lawn. She obviously couldn't see what we were doing, and I think what happened was she screamed really loudly and we ran really quickly away. I grabbed my bag, Travis grabbed a whole bunch of stuff. Candy only had to grab the car keys, which were on the driveway next to us, and she didn't. And so we ran around the block and down another road, and we were hiding in someone else's driveway with all our stuff, out of breath, absolutely panicked and terrified. Are we going to be found? There's people wandering the streets, there's lights, there's torches, there's noise. And we realize that the car keys are left there. They find the car keys and take them. And so we are stuck at 2 o'clock in the morning, dressed black, camouflage gear, face lines, without any keys. And in the car there's there's laptops and there's cameras, so we can't just leave it. And I mean, this kind of led to one of my greatest stories with my friend Rob, who died a few years ago of cancer. But one of the best stories I have of him, maybe not for him, but this was mine, was 2 o'clock in the morning, phoning him, waking him up at 2 in the morning. And my first words to him were, "Oh, you can't sleep either." And Rob, being the gracious friend that he was, came and rescued us with spare keys to get the car. And so, yeah, toilet papering a deacon's house, really dumb idea. Please don't do it. But just think along the mindset of out of the box, something different. And the second one is, again, probably something you shouldn't do, and probably something I shouldn't be as proud of as I am. But when I was living in Stellenbosch, and for years and years and years, I'd wanted to do this. I don't know if I saw it somewhere or if it was my idea. I think it was my idea. But there were a lot of to let signs where people are renting properties and offices and plots. And for years, I'd wanted to improve a to let sign. And so this one night, I was hanging out at my friend Megan's house. And again, like a lot of these stories are weird because they end up being with friends of my friends. So I'm trying to remember whether Megan came out with us, and I feel like she didn't. I feel like Megan's friend Anya, who I called Onion at the time, went out, and I think it might have just been me and Onion. Or Megan might have been there and she took the photos and the two of us did the sign improvement. I can't remember. But I have this vague suspicion that it was just me and Onion, which is really weird. The next story that you hear as well is friend of a friend. How do people end up doing these things with me? I don't know. So again, we dressed up in black. We head out with red lipstick because the to let sign was red on a white background. And often these signs are out of reach. They're like high up or you just can't get to them. This was on an empty plot that they were trying to let. And so 2 o'clock in the morning, I spend time with this lipstick adding an eye to the perfect space in the sign. So to change a to let sign to a toilet sign, which I think is the greatest thing in the world ever. And I want to do it again, even though it's probably illegal, so don't do it and I probably won't. But wow, like for a couple of weeks, actually it stayed there and it was in a prominent place in town. I think it got into the local newspaper and I've got photos of it. And that, like, it's such a random thing, and especially at 2 in the morning when you're trying to put lipstick on a sign and you're realizing that it doesn't come off as easily as you want it to, and that this seemed like a great idea in your head and it's going to take you like 40 minutes and you're nervous every time a car drives by or there's cop lights or whatever. But for the rest of your life, you have this cool story about the time you improved a to let sign to a toilet sign. So that's what I'm talking about. The Argus Cycle Tour is another. Now, I've done the Argus Cycle Tour 16 times. I finished it 16 times. I started it 18 times. Those are 2 other stories. But I remember one of the early times that I cycled it, I was working at the Spur restaurant at the time. And so I cycled in my Spur uniform. So I had my apron turned backwards, so all my chocolates and energy bar stuff could be in the back pocket. And I was wearing, at the time, the white and red striped shirts and the Spur cap sticking out underneath my helmet. And for the entire Argus Cycle Tour, I had people cycling past me ordering burgers, which was funny for maybe halfway through the first one. And by the time you got to the 28th one, a lot less funny. But what is interesting when you've got a field of 20, 30,000 cyclists who are just cyclists is when you've got somebody cycling in a Spur uniform. Or there was a guy who used to dress as an old granny every year. People that dress up as animal in full animal suits. Don't try it. Those things get so hot. I remember doing it in my gorilla mask, and within about 5Ks I had the gorilla mask off and kind of wrapped in my clothes somewhere because it was so hot. But another thing that I used to do, and this is probably the highlight of my Argus cycling tour career, is that I spent a year on a music and drama team, and we had a kiddies drama in which I played the bad dude, but the good dude for the kiddies drama wore pink tights. And so when I went home, I think I'd played the good guy once or twice. I took home 2 pairs of these pink tights, and I did the Argus cycle tour wearing pink tights. Now listen to this. I am not a well-trained person, so I do not spend lots of time training. In fact, the highlight of my Argus cycle tour career was when the year before's race was my training for this year, and I literally wouldn't touch a bike in between years. And so I didn't put a lot of effort in. So for me, getting through the Argus was a lot of mental power. And if you're wearing pink tights, then when you get to Seikabosi, which is one of the worst hills in the race, right near the end, when there are people standing up both sides of the road and they are braaiing and they have been drinking for a long time and they are drunk and look like they would like to beat the crap out of you, if you are wearing pink tights at that point, there is nothing that will make you stop and walk. And so good mental strategy to keep going to the end of the race. Now, the one time I managed to get my best buddy from school, Duncan, not him, but his mate, Warren. Again, I don't know how this works with the friends of friends, but people are very trusting or foolish or something. His mate, Warren, I managed to get him to wear fishnet stockings. And I remember how it happened because I was at Century City and I was shopping to try find pink tights. And I remember phoning Warren and saying, oh, I'm struggling to get pink tights. And Warren, I think, was at a wedding or something. So he was like, oh, I can't talk. Just do whatever. Just whatever. I'm good. And you quickly learn the good advice of not to give BrettFish carte blanche. And so I saw some fishnets and I thought that is going to be amazing. And so I bought fishnets, and Warren and I wore fishnets, and to his credit, I don't think he even put up a fight. He was like, cool, and did it. And I think that was the Argus where I was parked outside his house and we were putting on the fishnets and my bicycle was literally stolen out of my car outside and I had to go and borrow Duncan's extra bike to do the race. But we did the race in fishnet stockings. Now, if you can imagine somebody cycling for 6 hours in the burning sun, in fishnet stockings, when they have not applied sun cream to their legs because it felt like their legs were covered and they didn't really think about it, then just imagine what kind of a 6-hour tan burn you have. Classic, and I've got photos of that, and that is, one of the most classic burns you can have. I was working as a youth leader, so it didn't matter because that feels like kind of your everyday thing, but Warren was working in a company, and so I think he had to wear long pants for the whole of the summer to hide his burn. And again, to his credit, like, we're still friends. He didn't run away from me. And again, like, in the moment, what fishnets and pink tights do in the Argus is they make life exciting for the crowd. So you've got crowds who are cheering on 30,000 cyclists. It gets boring because it's just cyclist after cyclist after cyclist. So for the crowd, it's exciting when there's something different. A man cycling past in pink tights is different. 2 men cycling past in fishnet stockings is different. And then that was a year, the fishnets, I think we had ESCOM signs. So the sign was ex-dom or power failure expected up Seikabossi. So we had fun t-shirts that had been made for the event. So it was full on dress up and the fishnets and the pink stockings. And it made the race exciting for people that we cycled with. It gave other people energy because you want to beat the person in the pink fishnets. You don't want to let them get past you. And so it just creates a whole lot of buzz and vibe. And then the last story that I have in terms of kind of this life to the full vibe is that during lockdown last year, I made a lockdown Christmas music video in which 2 of us dressed up in bunny costumes in Newlands Forest. And I asked a whole bunch of my friends to send in headbanging videos. And so friends and family sent in these clips of headbanging videos. And I made a Christmas carol, The 12 Days of Lockdown, which I stuck on YouTube and which, again, provided a lot of fun for a lot of people. Now, the world that we live in is a difficult, messed up, chaotic place, and that's at the best of times. During this pandemic, it has just been nuts for so many of us. And so most of the time, it might feel like existing or surviving is all we have. I get that. And I don't want to suggest that living differently is easy. And so these interruptions, for some of us, may feel really small. It might be a walk with a friend. It might be finding our way to a beach or a park or some stunning nature. It might be having breakfast for dinner or dusting off an old board game. Or it might be this, the last idea that I want to share with you, which anyone can do, rich or poor, old or young, doesn't matter what language you speak, wherever you live. And if you can't afford paper, which is the only resource you need, it can be done verbally. So we lived in Philly in an intentional community house for 18 months, which basically meant we didn't get to choose our housemates. And so for the longest time, there were just 4 of us, and then a 5th person joined. And I can't remember if it was Dan or Suan at the time. I think it was Suan. And so the 5 of us went out for dinner. We made some thin strips of paper, and each one had about 10 to 15 of them. And we wrote down one question on each piece of paper. And from simple, non-invasive questions like what's your favorite color, what is the best TV series growing up, to some really more extreme deep dives. What is a regret you have? When was a time that you felt really alone? What was the last thing that made you cry? And we folded these up and stuck them in a bowl. And this was our introduction to this 5th member that was about to join our household. And the rules were quite simple. We took turns to take a question, and you could either answer the question or you could make the rest of the table answer it. And one meal and something like 2 hours later, we headed back home. And the activity had been so profound that we continued playing back at the house, maybe for another hour or 2. So 3 to 4 hours of kind of this game or activity. And we really connected and bonded deeply as a group that night. And we pulled out the same activity at a Christmas dinner that we hosted with Val's family the one year when we were staying in Southfield. And it was a time when we weren't particularly close, I think. And the idea was received quite awkwardly or hesitantly. It was, this weird thing that we have to do. But once we got going, it was, again, a really profound and eye-opening time. And I remember everyone enjoyed it. Everyone loved it. So grab some friends or colleagues, or maybe even a team you're part of where you don't know each other so well, or even if you do, and set an hour or 2 aside. If you've got like 3 or 4 hours available, then invite people into a 1-hour activity. And if it's going really well, you can just extend it into that time. For those of you with kids, maybe this is something you want to do at the dinner table, and maybe it's something you want to do once a week. Thursday becomes question night, and everybody gets to write 2 questions or 1 question, and it just becomes a nice, fun tradition that you do. And I remember when I had a shorter time with a small group of Red Frogs leaders in Plet a few years ago, I just prepared all of the questions because we didn't have time to kind of prepare them together. And that works just as well. If you've got time, it's nicer to involve everyone in terms of creating the dynamic of the game. But it is one of the most powerful activities I've ever done. It's such a great way to step away from screens for a few hours. And if there's an outside table or space where you can do this, go outside, breathe, ask and listen. And as I said, it's really one of the most life-giving activities I can think of. So please go and give this a try and come back and tell me how it went. I really want to hear how this goes. I'm really hoping this week a bunch of you are going to go, yeah, cool, let's do this. Let's find the space. Let's try it with families. Let's do it on the weekend. Invite some friends around. This is a really weird thing to explain and expect people to get. It's a thing that when you do it, you'll be like, wow, that's amazing. How have I never done this before? So please, please, please give this a try and find some way of coming back to me and just letting me know how it went, even if it goes really badly. I've never known it to go badly. So please do this and come and tell me how it goes. The purpose of this glorious life is not simply to endure it, but to soar, stumble, and flourish as you learn to fall in love with existence. We were born to live, my dear, not to merely exist. So go and live. Routine and discipline can be so super helpful and necessary, and sometimes our life situation calls for us to be in survival mode, literally just trying to put one foot in front of the other. But make time to interrupt that on a regular basis. Make a pillow fort with your kids and sleep in it together. Heck, make a pillow fort even if you don't have kids. And stick it on Instagram. Have that cheat moment for your diet. Get outdoors and nature it up. Watch the cheesiest, most awful movie you can find. My friend Megan and I used to pick bad movies. The Pacifier with Vin Diesel was one of the first ones we saw. And we used to go and watch them and then do commentary throughout the movies or have a whole bunch of kind of lines that would be our joke lines that we'd have together. Pull out a jigsaw puzzle. Run outside in the rain. Write a poem. Sing in the shower. Choose life. Thrive. Remind yourself that you are alive. And one great way to do that, if you haven't already, is to subscribe to this podcast, Out of the Fishbowl, and maybe go and leave a review. Think of somebody that you know that would really need to hear this particular episode. Who do you know that is kind of existing or surviving and maybe they just need a little push or a little boost? And go and send them a link or go and listen to it with them and ask them what they think. Like, if you love this, if you found it helpful, go and tell someone else. Tag a bunch of your friends and say, hey, give this a listen. This is really great stuff. And make sure that you tune in next week for a really deep diving, provocative episode titled The Depth Penalty. I'm BrettFish and this was Out of the Fishbowl, and thank you for giving me your time.